Hi, I'm Cami Williams, and I'm a project specialist at TTAC William and Mary. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to listen to our brief discussion on instructional strategies that we can use to reach all students in the math classroom. Particularly, we're going to be talking about the secondary classroom. So we're going to approach this from a visible learning standpoint. When teachers take on a visible learning approach to instruction, they're agreeing to view the learning through the eyes of the students. So that's how they're preparing instruction, by viewing it through the learning through the eyes of the student. And at the same time, students are going to take ownership of their own learning by viewing themselves as their own teacher. That is the goal with visible learning. And I think that most of us can see how that viewing instruction from that standpoint that would support equitable instruction in the math classroom. Because if you have teachers thinking less about what the material is that needs to be covered and what the steps are going to be, and how I'm going to tell them what those steps are, and looking at it from, okay, how are the students going to view this? How do I feel they're going to learn? What are the best ways they're going to learn this information? You're already reaching more students by just changing that mindset and having that shift in thinking. When you think about it on the end of the students who are just there to receive the information alone, you're going to hit more students when you have those students that shift from that way of thinking into thinking, okay, how can I do this when I'm on my own? How can I teach myself how to get out of, if I hit a speed bump, how I can get out of that? And in math, that's extremely important because there are a lot of things in math that involve multiple steps. And we want students to be able to work as independently as possible. And if they view themselves as their own teacher, then they are going to be more equipped to do that. That visible learning approach is just paramount to an equitable learning environment. So today we're going to look at just 3 instructional strategies. There are tons out there that can be used, but we're going to focus on 3 instructional strategies today that align with visible learning that will also promote equitable instruction. And those 3 areas or strategies are going to be math discourse, use of multiple representations, and viewing mistakes as learning opportunities. Now, instead of me boring you with my voice to talk about all 3 of these, I felt it would be extremely important and helpful for teachers, specifically new teachers, new special educators, and teachers that are also maybe not as comfortable teaching in the math classroom, special educators that aren't as comfortable collaborating or teaching a resource class around math. I thought it would be more helpful for you to hear from a teacher who has been there, done that, and is still doing it. So I'm going to welcome Tanisha Facey. We have a veteran special educator here that's going to talk to us about how those 3 areas play out in her resource classroom. So I want to welcome her and thank her for coming on to talk with us today. And Tanisha, I'm just going to ask you to just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your educational background with teaching, and how long you've been teaching, what levels and subjects, etc.
Hey, Cami, thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to discuss these areas. I think they are important, and a platform to talk about how important it is for students to take ownership of their learning, especially when we talk about math, because so many people are scared of math.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have been teaching for over almost 12 years now, completing my 12th year in education, and I'm still baffled sometimes when I hear students absolutely hate when they have to go into the subject of geometry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they've heard so many bad things about the topic or the subject area, and not really thinking, oh, I've been learning geometry since I started talking about shapes.
Mm-hmm.
So getting students to be able to communicate their learning, knowing how to get resources, how to further get resources, helps them become better adults and problem solvers, and thinking even when you think about things outside of math. So I absolutely appreciate this platform to discuss that, because I think it's very important for us as teachers to communicate this information to our students who will soon be adults. But again, yes, I'm Tanisha Facey, a teacher in the Tidewater area for 12 years, completing my 12th year in education, all within special education. I started my career off in self-contained elementary school classroom. I only did 1 year in elementary. I felt like for me, elementary was a challenge because I feel like elementary was a challenge
Mhm.
because, you have more little hands, little people, and little people touching you and hugging you all the time and crying. But more specifically, I did not like teaching elementary school math. Okay. And I would go further into why I didn't like teaching elementary school math a little bit later down in one of the topics we said we were going to talk about. But then I left elementary school and I went to high school, and I did 10 years solely in high school in the math classroom, specifically algebra 1, algebra 2, and geometry. And now I am currently in a middle school, predominantly it's a combined middle school, high school setting, but most of my instruction focuses on this grade 6 through 8 math. And it is a school where we are 88% African American, and we are at about almost 79% at the lower socioeconomic status. So with that being said, I have a lot of challenges that are presented to, someone that teaches in the urban setting, but it gives me the opportunity to always reflect and revise and come up with new ways to present things, come in every day, not with an attitude, but the idea that I'm going to embrace change and evolve every day as a better teacher to help my students.
I love you said reflect, revive, and revise. And I think that's super important when we're talking about equitable learning environments, because if we're not willing to reflect on what just happened, whether it was the 10 minutes of instruction I just gave, or what I taught the day before, what I taught last unit, what worked, what didn't work, what I taught last year, what worked, what didn't work, and revise that. I think as teachers and educators, we do need to make sure we're always doing exactly what you just said, coming into it with an idea, reflecting on what we did and revising those ideas. And I love that, especially coming from someone who is not a general ed math teacher. So math isn't your first language, right? So you're a special educator coming in to teach students math in your resource class. And it's extremely important to be able to reflect and revise, because you're not only reflecting on what you may have done, you also have to reflect on what the general educator has, presented to the student, and revising that in a way that you can reach more of your students. So I love that. So could you tell me, before we get started in the 3 areas though, what is your approach to ensuring that you reach all of your students? Besides, you did already mention reflecting and revising, but how else do you view the instruction in your resource class?
When I think about instruction in my resource classroom, of course, the foundation to teaching and anybody learning anything is going to the basics, which is building relationships. It's very important for me to, as a class, we set the ground rules, we come up with our non-negotiables, we respect each other, but they also feel that I wholeheartedly and genuinely care about each and every one of them as individuals. Let them know that I am there to address their needs, their concerns. If they're having a good day or bad day, they feel more comfortable to come and say, hey, we were in class doing this. I didn't get this. I just absolutely don't get it. I don't want to see anymore. I have to make them feel comfortable about that. So again, that relationship piece is a really big part of what goes on in the resource room. I love teaching in the resource room because you do have that smaller, intimate setting. You can see the students gain more individually over the course of that year, over the course of maybe the next year, however long you need to have them. And then when it comes to teaching, my actual teaching strategy in the resource room is pre-teaching, not remediation. Now, what is the difference? Pre-teaching means that you're going to build upon those skills that students need before they walk into that general ed classroom for that particular skill that day. So it gives them the opportunity to feel like they're ahead of the game and not defeated before they even reach the classroom door. So it empowers their learning. Okay. Now, remediation, of course, that means they've already seen the general ed teacher. They probably most likely didn't even really pay attention because they were already lost when they got there. So it creates more behavior problems or off-task behaviors because they feel defeated. But then when they come down to the classroom, to the resource room, you have a little bit more of a challenge to try to break that barrier. So it's made your job harder as a teacher, as well as the student already feels like they're giving up. And we don't want that. And I do know that when I got on board with the pre-teaching concept and then got everybody on the team, because yes, I'm also the resource teacher, but I still have to collaborate with the kids' general ed teachers. When everybody got on board with the pre-teaching method, that was actually the year we started seeing a difference and an increase in our passing rate. So I'm all for pre-teaching. And I think majority of the people will see what I'm saying, especially when you realize those off-task behaviors or behavior problems in general. Then another thing I also believe in the resource room is providing choice, because when you provide a choice, you also, again, eliminate behavior problems when a student does not want to do something and it becomes a constant battle. You have to remember that you're the adult in the situation. So, you have to control that situation. You have to put some supports in place. So now if you give them a choice of assignments, yes, you have to provide some type of organization, because a lot of students with disabilities have deficits in executive functioning and organizational work study habits. So you have to provide supports. So what I do is I would create a visual, whether I write it on the board, I project it to the board, smart board or whatever, a list of assignments. My general rule of thumb would be like 10 assignments per week that I would provide. Now, those assignments can be really small assignments. It could be something that might take 5 minutes to something they may require them to take 20 minutes to an hour, because they process information differently. But again, you have a choice. It can range from the basic level skill to the multi-level thinking skills. It's up to me to decide at the end of the week where those students are having those misconceptions, where I think I would get the biggest bang for my buck, as far as which assignments I would actually grade and put in the grade book. It may actually be some assignments that parallel or overlap from their general ed classroom. So therefore, you're also helping the students with their grades in the general ed classroom. Again, the general ed classroom and the resource room should parallel to each other. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about students receiving, if we're talking about standards-based IEP goals. Okay. So it should be very parallel. Because we're not teaching here, we have to teach how we're going to raise the mark or how we're going to reach that benchmark. So we're providing that grade level instruction. So again, choice of assignments, pre-teaching, making sure you build those relationships and addressing students' concerns and making sure it is a wholeheartedly component there. I think I have reached the majority of my students and had the most success.
Thank you so much for saying that. I like the bullet points that you mentioned there, because I think some teachers, again, targeting audience here will be new teachers or teachers not as comfortable with math. And I think hearing that if your goal is to build those relationships so they feel comfortable talking to you when they're struggling, when they come in and they haven't understood something and they can ask for help, can feel supported, but also pre-teaching over remediation. Doesn't mean you may not have to at some point do that, but if your goal is always to pre-teach, then you're setting yourself and your students up for more success. So thank you for sharing that. So let's dive into these three strategies, these three instructional strategies I discussed: math discourse, multiple representations, and viewing mistakes and errors as an opportunity for learning.